Come on.
They're right there!
Let's go. Move, 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 move.
This episode of Choices Not Chances is sponsored by Louisiana Gun Shop, located in Broussard, Louisiana, just south of Lafayette. For more information, stay tuned at the end of this episode.
This is Choices Not Chances podcast with Ryan and Matt. I'm your co-host, Matthew Charette. Sitting next to me is Ryan Rogers. Ryan?
On 5 May 2018, Staff Sergeant Williams was serving as a gunner for a Crows system 50 caliber machine gun. Due to the high probability of enemy contact with the Special Forces Operation Detachment Alpha, they requested a competent senior leader to identify targets, relay them to the forward observer, and engage targets. The team selected Staff Sergeant Williams for the role. The mission required a mix of Special Forces and Marine units consisting of section-sized combat patrols, 28 personnel immediately behind the forward line of Syrian Democratic Forces. And now we're talking about being into Syria, which is pretty amazing. We'll get into that. So the purpose of the patrol was to cross the enemy forward line of troops and gather intelligence on the early warning and response networks of the ISIS forces in the region. This was the first cross-float, or is it flot? Second one? Cross-flot, okay. This is the first cross-flot mission for coalition forces in the area of operation since 2015. At 0800, approximately 200 meters away from the MFP on the ridge line in the OP position. Using the optics from the Crow system, he was able to provide additional observation to the forward observer. A second vehicle with a Mark 19 mounted Crows occupied a position 50 meters away to provide additional security along the ridge line. Minutes after occupation of the OP, ineffective mortar fire began bracketing the force, approximately 5 to 800 meters to the north and the south. At approximately 09, the enemy engaged the OP with ineffective heavy machine gun fire, impacting roughly 300 meters away from Staff Sergeant Williams' position. Staff Sergeant Williams identified and engaged multiple enemy targets from that position. Upon spotting three to four enemy personnel moving from compound approximately 1,000 meters to the east of the OP, he alerted the FO to suppress the enemy with the machine gun until the FO could adjust the mortars onto the compound to destroy it. During the engagement, an enemy fighter suspected of wearing a suicide vest approached the position on a motorcycle. Staff Sergeant Williams quickly identified the target and engaged the motorcycle at about 1,500 meters. The burst from his machine gun impacted the road directly in front of the motorcycle, causing the explosive rigged rider to immediately reverse direction and flee from the battlefield. At approximately 1000 hours, Staff Sergeant Williams spotted and engaged an enemy technical vehicle with a heavy mounted machine gun, forcing the driver to take his vehicle behind the building. Staff Sergeant Williams kept his weapon on the building and prepared to engage the vehicle if it moved. While he provided cover, the FO attempted to destroy the vehicle with all available air assets. At approximately 10:30, Staff Sergeant Williams' vehicle was struck by an anti-tank guided missile, fired from a position approximately 2 kilometers away. The ATGM struck the front passenger side of the vehicle, detonating upon hitting the vehicle's firewall. Simultaneously, heavy effective enemy mortar fire began falling on the OP. The ATGM strike wounded all 4 passengers in the vehicle. The vehicle commander, rear passenger, Staff Sergeant Williams suffered concussive injuries due to the intensity of the blast. The driver, who took the brunt of the blast, sustained serious shrapnel wounds to both of his legs, resulting in arterial bleeding, and received severe burns in his arms and his face. Despite the heavy effective enemy mortar fire impacting within 30 meters of his position, Staff Sergeant Williams dismounted the vehicle and exposed himself to intense enemy indirect fire. Even though he was severely disoriented and vomiting, Staff Sergeant Williams quickly identified the severity of the driver's wounds, got the driver out of the truck, and applied tourniquet to both of his legs. All that took place while mortar rounds continued to impact within 30 meters of his position. He assisted in moving the driver to the casualty collection point where he would await evacuation. The driver was loaded into the passenger was loaded into a partner force armored vehicle and evacuated to the friendly side of the FLOT, where he could later be evacuated by air to receive a higher echelon of care. Staff Sergeant Williams then assisted in retrieving as many sensitive items from the burning truck as he could, while the position continued to receive effective enemy mortar fire. When a second ATGM struck within 50 meters of their position, the ground force commander deemed the position untenable. Staff Sergeant Williams, along with the other members, destroyed the vehicle, hung onto the outside of one of the remaining MATVs, and were driven about 200 meters to the MFP, where they would be cross-loaded into other vehicles and conduct a withdrawal under fire to the friendly side of the FLOT. Once on the friendly side of the FLOT, the damaged MATV was blown in place with two 500-pound JDAMs in order to destroy all sensitive material. The 3 remaining casualties were evacuated by ground to the main Army Special Force Fire Base to receive Role 2 medical care. Staff Sergeant Williams' actions were both heroic and critical to the success of the mission. The suppression he provided using his heavy machine gun brought critical time to the FO to relay fire missions to the mortar team and destroy the enemy targets. Staff Sergeant Williams was personally responsible for two ISIS fighters killed in action, and his actions facilitated approximately 8 to 10 other ISIS fighters KIA. He was responsible for preventing at least one suicide fighter from closing with friendly forces and detonating his payload. Lastly, and most importantly, Staff Sergeant Williams provided medical aid to fellow service member while exposing himself to the effects of enemy fire during a combined arms attack on his team. It is for these actions in the support of Army Special Forces SFD during this Defeat ISIS campaign in northeast Syria that Staff Sergeant Williams is deserving of the Bronze Star Medal with the Valor Device. And we are joined by Staff Sergeant Williams, now not a staff sergeant anymore, but then, so I like to just call you John Wayne. I think that's what we're going to call the episode. So John Wayne Williams, current gunning, active duty Marine. And that's a hell of a story. We'll get to it, but I want to know how we got there. And so thank you for coming on behalf of me, Matt. We super appreciate you coming out and just kind of share to the world what you got to share. So I guess first let's just talk about like early days, childhood. Do you where'd you grow up, family life, siblings, sports, that kind of stuff?
Okay. So I grew up in western Pennsylvania, a small town called Elwood City. It's north of Pittsburgh, south of Erie, Lawrence County. It's right next to Butler County. Most people ain't even heard of it. Grew up hunting, fishing, did bull riding and raced flat track. Wasn't any good at motocross. Just had to have a sister. Had my mom, my dad. That was it.
Younger sister, older sister?
She's 2 years younger than me.
Okay. And both parents in the home?
Oh yeah.
Good. And sports was mainly rodeo?
Rodeo.
What outside of that?
Nothing.
You just rodeoed?
Yep. Rodeos and motorcycles, man.
Okay, so motorcycles. Yeah, I guess I knew that about you. Awesome. And so high school, you loved school?
No. I mean, I got kicked out of high school. I had to go to finish my last 2 years in an alternative ed school, but okay. I mean, I got straight A's. The ADHD just kind of played into that, but
yeah. So, high school, you graduated what year?
2005.
2005. So you're either middle school, high school at 9/11 time frame.
I was 14, so I think I was a freshman in high school.
Yeah. And did that does that play a role in your decision to join? I
was already planning to join the military. I mean, I was leaning more towards the Army, but 9/11 definitely solidified it. And I mean, oh yeah, I'm going. Just another 4 years. Just a matter of time. I just kept looking at the watch,
Right. Okay. So if you say you already knew, at what point did you know that's what you wanted to do?
So I mean, my dad was in during Vietnam. It was a big part of his life prior to him getting married and having kids, and I always knew it was, and it's just something I just knew that was what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm. And what'd he do?
He was in the Army.
Okay. And multiple tours of Vietnam? Was he drafted to Vietnam?
Nope, he joined.
Okay. Okay.
He caught the tail end of Vietnam, did one tour there, and then he ended up moving over to combat engineers, did 4 years stationed in Germany.
Okay. Heck yeah. And so, was it talked about a lot growing up? Like, did you know of it a lot? Did he share anything?
Not really. He was
But for whatever reason, you just knew that was exactly what you were going to do too.
I did.
That's awesome. And so from a young age, you know this, and you already got your eye set on it, your focus set on it,
I remember,
at least in the back of your brain, right?
I remember seeing a recruiter. My mom took me down to Ocean City, Maryland one summer, and we were on the boardwalk, and there was a recruiter who had a little station set up. They were giving out posters and water bottles and stickers, and he had a pull-up bar. And I think I was 12 or 13. I hopped up on the pull-up bar and did like 11 pull-ups. And he's like, "Holy shit, there's Marines in the Marine Corps that can't even do that many." Like, you know, and I'm like, "Oh, I'll be doing more by the time I join." And I mean, you know, I was, but they mailed me a letter. It was like, "Oh, you're not old enough to join yet, but hey, here's some stickers and a poster, and like keep us in mind." And I did.
Get you hooked. Heck yeah. And so was that your recruiter's easiest mission to fill?
So the first recruiter I talked to when I was 17 pretty much told me, because of my gunshot wound, that, hey, you need a waiver, too much paperwork, I don't want to deal with it.
Hang on. Let's back up to the gunshot wound. We've skipped past that during childhood, I suppose.
Okay,
He just kind of slipped that in there and didn't just continued on about his business on that one.
Yeah. How'd that go down?
So I was 12 years old. My dad and I were shooting rabbits that were eating plants in my mom's garden, and the last rabbit ran across our property line and underneath the neighbor's deck, so we couldn't go after it. So we were walking back, and his 22 just went off, hit me in the back, ended up putting 14 holes in my intestine, just missed my liver, my spleen, my spine, and it came out right next to my belly button.
Good.
That's why I got that big ass
scar.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay. So you were like not afraid to get shot, and you're still going in. So,
yeah.
Okay. But he says, no, you can't do it. Too much paperwork.
Too much paperwork, yep. And then the second recruiter, I actually met him on the way to a rodeo. So he seen me. I was at a gas station filling up my truck, and he's like, "Hey, cowboy, where are you headed?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going bull riding up at the rodeo." And he's like, "I grew up in Arizona, and I used to do calf roping." And in his dress blues, in his government vehicle, busts out a rope. And one of my buddies was making fun of him, and he, no shit, roped his girlfriend in the gas station parking lot.
Makes sense.
And he's like, "Hey, you mind if I follow you up there and watch?" And he did. He sat there in his blues and literally watched the whole rodeo. And afterwards, he's like, "Hey, did you ever think about joining the Marine Corps?" And I was like, "Man, I was wondering when you were going to ask me that." Like, yeah. And next day, I was at the recruiting office, and I took the practice ASVAB, did really well. And he's like, "Yeah, man, like, you know, is there anything I should know about?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got a gunshot wound." He goes, "That's nothing. We'll get you in." And, yep.
Nice. And you just told him you wanted to be in infantry straight out?
Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, so then you ship relatively soon?
So I got to asked him if I could take the summer to just keep working on the farms, keep making money, keep bull riding, which I did. And then end of summer, it was August 2005, I shipped out.
Parris Island or?
Parris Island.
Mm-hmm. How'd that go?
I was down there for 5.5 months.
Oh, no, you get hurt?
I did.
What happened?
So I had a stress fracture in my right leg. Didn't want to quit. Kept going. And I had a stress fracture in my left leg and still didn't want to quit. And then my right leg completely fractured. So I ended up in the medical rehabilitation, the MRP platoon. And instead of spending 3 months on Parris Island, it took me 5.5. But healed up, went back, finished it out. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, man.
I mean, it's not probably what you had in mind, but it worked out.
That was back when, you know, kids were quitting left and right. They didn't want to be there. They were gay, you know, all kind of mental issues. And just, I couldn't wait to get back and get into it.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny the amount of guys that have been through the ringer when we talk about boot camp. Most of them came in, they're like, you know, yeah, it was okay. Like, not a big factor. To them, like, they didn't have big stories. Like, yeah, I mean, I really thought it was going to be harder, but, you know, I'm glad I got through it, and that's not a big thing. And then it's just funny how everybody has that same kind of,
right,
you know, feeling about it. Because there's tons of people that, they can tell you some boot camp stories. They can tell you terrifying things. They can tell you funny things. And most of the guys I talk to is like, yeah, nothing really.
I think it's mainly because it's not such a big part of, you know, what we do.
Right.
It's just what we got to do to get to do what we do, you know. Whereas other people, it was almost like the highlight of their.
And it could have been. Yeah, it could have been. That's a good point. I didn't think about it like that. It could have been. Absolutely. Okay, so what you graduate boot camp in 5 months, and you shipped to where?
I went home for 10 days of leave, 28 days of recruiter's assistance. So back to the farms and you know, Amish school.
What was the first unit?
What's that?
What was your unit?
Well, I mean, I went to SOI.
Yeah.
After that, became a machine gunner and went to 3-6, 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines, India Company. Yep.
Shout out 3-6. My home too. I love it. So you check in at Lima Company. What year is this?
India.
India. I'm sorry.
2006. It was May 2006.
Okay.
And went right into a workup for Iraq. Man, those guys had gotten back 7-8 months prior to me. Not even. Maybe like 5 months before I checked in, they got back and they're already doing a workup to go back. Yeah,
and the op tempo at the time's like 7 in, 8 out, 7 in, 10 out, 7 in, 7 out. Yeah, that was a straight gas portion of the war right there. So you get in straight into a workup, and what, your rifle platoon, or did you go to a weapons platoon or weapons company?
Weapons platoon.
Okay, weapons platoon. Okay, awesome. And then you do your workup and you push to
Habbaniyah, Iraq.
Habbaniyah.
So I know our battalion, we had Fallujah, Ramadi, and Habbaniyah. So we were all over the damn place.
Pretty awesome trifecta right there.
Right.
It's basically
the triangle of death. That's what they call it.
Yes, sir. Yep. Oh man. And so, how'd that deployment go? That first pump?
Pretty kinetic. First 3-4 months were pretty kinetic. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
A couple KIAs. Yeah.
Yeah. And then following Habbaniyah, you come home. You're still going to stay in the same unit then, huh?
Yep. Came home, was only home for 7 months, and went right back to Iraq, Fallujah this time in 2008.
Mm-hmm. I would have been, I might have been over in the country at the same time, but I wasn't in Fallujah. We did Sadr, Karabla, Rawa, Syrian side.
Out towards Al-Assad,
And on that, at that time frame, it was way less kinetic, at least for me. Like, and I don't know exactly. You were in a much different area, but like Karabla, Sadr, Gannon, like Camp Gannon on the Syrian border, all that had got annihilated during Steel Fist and Iron Curtain right before I came in.
That was the deployment before me hitting the fleet. Yep.
Yeah, and so when I got there, like virtually a lot of those towns were rubble. You could see where they had. Al-Qaeda had snipers because there'd be 50 cal holes and grenade, half the steeple's gone, everything else is sprayed and peppered. And I'm coming through as a junior squad leader. I had just picked up corporal. I'm coming through this thing going, oh my goodness. And like, I'm glad I wasn't the guys doing that because I'd needed to not be leading a squad. Like, I just didn't understand yet. Which, whatever, I hadn't been there yet, at least to that place. And it was wild because you could tell there was an all-out battle there. And rubble buildings. It was just crazy. It was a mess. Then I get there, and then, we had pocket resistance. We had pop shots fired at us multiple times. And a lot of times it was like trying to distinguish who was local militia and who was actual enemy and who was just walking to their house because everybody had guns still. And then, so it was kind of contentious there. I learned my first frustration for rules of engagement on that deployment in my first bump into Iraq. Horrible. And so, wild. And so, any highlight, any big, I'm sure there's memorable things, but things you want to touch on, Ramadi?
So Fallujah. Fallujah, we ripped out with 3-5, and they were like, hey, we didn't have anybody, no KIAs. Had one guy, a crane fell on him and crushed his legs. That was the highlight of their deployment. No enemy fire, nothing. We ripped out, and not even 2 weeks later, I was having to medevac 2 kids from my company. IED went off. Corporal ended up losing both his legs, and Lance Corporal, his arm was hanging on by a thread. And they were calling from a handheld radio and almost didn't get it. I mean, I was out driving enablers around to conduct reset training. So I think, we had the ADGE with us, giving an ROE EOF class. We had a G-Boss guy that went around and gave G-Boss classes. We had a Warlock guy. Mm-hmm. There was the Navy chief that was going around giving hygiene classes. So I'm driving them around to all the positions that India Company had in southern Fallujah, and I hear this call come over the radio, and the CP couldn't hear it. So I relayed it to him, And I was asking, hey, do you want us to respond? I can be there in like 3 minutes. And they're like, negative, stand by. I was like, hell with this. Just went. By the time they told me to go, I was already there. And we got there, ended up having to medevac them. They had closed down Fallujah Surgical, and I had to medevac them all the way to TQ, and we got them there in under 20 minutes. And I mean, I was hauling.
That is carrying some serious ass.
Blew the motor out of my Humvee about 2 miles outside the gate. It was like, hey, just keep pushing, come back and rig us for tow. And ended up saving that corporal's life, and that lance corporal ended up keeping it, kept his arm. But
that's awesome.
That was 2 weeks into after the rip, man, not even. And then a couple of days later, we're doing another mass CAS for a bunch of Iraqi police that they cut us off on Route Mobile. They were hauling. We were probably doing 40, 50. These guys were doing 60, 70.
Oh, no.
And 2 Humvees. And they passed us and turned onto, I can't remember the name of that road. On one side, it's Wolverine Way. On the other side, you got Camp Bahria and Camp Fallujah. Well, they turn onto that dirt road to go towards Bahria or Fallujah, and they hit a massive IED. And I watched that Humvee go up in the air and just kind of come down and just roll, and people and shit and weapons and everything, water bottles flying out of it. And we stopped and picked those guys up and medevaced them to a Jordanian field hospital just on the outskirts of Fallujah, right on Michigan, and ended up saving most of them.
That's awesome.
But that was just days into that, weeks into that deployment. And,
welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome in. Well, that sets the tone, right? You could wait. I mean, I don't know. I had different deployments. I had deployments like the one I talked about before, where I came in and nothing happened for the first 3 months. And then, generally for a lot of the Marines, some complacency can set in. Whereas if in the beginning, like the Marja one later on, you come into a hot LZ where nobody's fucking around. You know what I mean? So pros and cons. But you would hope that nobody ever has to get hurt. But
that ain't war.
I mean, in war, people are going to get hurt. That's a fact. All right, so what's next?
SOI.
Instructor?
Yep. I re-enlisted in Fallujah as a corporal. Got $41,500 tax-free.
Whoop, whoop.
Yep. And got SOI East, so I, became a combat instructor and literally did a year in the company pushing Marines through. I taught 4 cycles as a 0311 instructor.
Yep.
Even though I don't have that MOS, and then I did three cycles as a machine gun instructor, and then I got pulled over to the weapons instructor group to teach on the platform. And
what year was that for?
What's that?
What year was that?
2009 I went over.
9, yeah.
So 9 to 12, 2009 to 2012 was over at SOI.
Oh, yeah. And then did you stay in the WIG until you left?
Yep.
That's awesome.
2 whole years in the WIG. I mean, I picked up 0341 as a secondary. But yeah, spent 2 years just teaching heavy, mainly 50 and mark. But I mean, I taught 240, 50 and mark, and would do a range, if not 2 ranges a week for 2 years. So I got a lot of time behind the guns, and just
for sure,
literally listen to a machine gun and be like, oh, that needs more lube, or oh, you need to advance the timing on that one, or just odd stuff, man. Like it just
absolutely. What's crazy is like if I would say if you ever want to be an expert at something, you should teach it. Because you learn how much you don't. Well, there was a couple things that, like, I became a platform instructor in the TIG for mount when I was over there, and I fancied myself a pretty good mount guy. Coming out of the last deployment I'd done, and I felt pretty good about it. And then I got into the master lesson files, and I got into like digging deep into how we're actually writing these classes. And then it's like the kids are so smart now. The privates have come through. If you're wrong, you'll know about it.
Oh yeah.
That one whippersnapper's going to throw his hand up in there and with a cocky swag call you out on some shit that he knows is wrong, and then you're drowned. And so you can never be wrong, And not that they call you out, but they're going to raise their hand and be like, "What about this?" And if you're wrong, you're going to lose credibility in front of the students. It's the whole nine. So. I learned more about being an effective shooter and mount practitioner, whatever you want to call it, when I taught it than when I was actually, in the fleet training it. I learned more of the mechanics, let's say. And then if you combine that with the physical, iterations of it, then you're talking about a much better situation. But I never learned that until I actually started trying to teach people about shooting.
Yep.
So pretty dope. So you do 2 years in the WIG, and then you come up on orders again.
Yep. Came up on orders. They had orders for 2-8, so 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. and checked in February of 2012 and got assigned to Golf Company Weapons Platoon. So got there, took over as a platoon sergeant. They didn't have a platoon sergeant, and they're like, hey, you have 2 out of the 3 MOSs in a weapons platoon, 31 and 41, so...
Makes sense.
It's you.
And you're a staff sergeant at this point?
Sergeant.
Sergeant, okay. Yeah, nice.
Yep.
All right, so you take over and what, you start a workup?
We started, they were already starting a workup. We were supposed to go to Afghanistan 5 months after I checked in, but at the time, I mean, they had just gotten back from a pretty rough Afghan pump, and man, I think we had 4 suicides, 1 a month for 4 months straight, and he ended up pushing our deployment back to 2013. So we didn't go to Afghanistan until April of 2013.
And where did you
go? So we started out in Nawa. So we had Nawa, Trek Nawa, right outside Marja.
Yeah.
We're at FOB Geronimo. Basically ran a map tune or map section.
Yeah.
Very similar. I mean, I did the same thing in Fallujah in 08, but not kinetic at all. I mean, a couple IEDs here and there. Learning about the Afghan roads, how different they are from
a little different
the streets of Fallujah. Yeah. But spent 2 months doing that. We started tearing down Geronimo. We pulled out of there, got sent to Leatherneck, and then we became one of the battalion. 2 companies in our battalion, Fox Company and my company, Golf. We were the aerial raid force. So they just, hey, you're going to Sangin, you're going to Kajaki, you're going to spend a lot of time in Nowzad.
Yeah.
Ended up doing 2 missions to Herat.
Good.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And you're doing these truck?
Nope. We're getting heloed in, helo inserted, and helo extracted.
And are these days, weeks?
Most of them were just day ops, but
going in and doing a hard hit and then heloing back out.
Yep.
That's what's up. I think didn't.
So I think India had Geronimo.
Okay, no, I was just talking about helo raids. I know that we inserted in helos, but then our CO, we kind of got tied up at the flagpole because that was our area where they were moving into. So it made sense for us to stay there while they got there. You know, the battalion main got up. Like I'm talking about Hanson. So before it was just us. So then when battalion comes in, you don't want to be there. You want to leave there now. And so our company went out east to like Riley, right? Down the road a bit and left us there because we were the ones already patrolling, already had a system, already had a home, already had our guys right there. And it sucked, but our company goes out east, and then we get stuck at the flagpole. Anyway, long story short.
No, but the CO, I think they ran like 1 or 2 raids
while we were stuck
down south of Cop Riley.
That's what I was getting at. We missed it. We're sitting up there playing fuck games, paying people for grain and CAG missions.
Yep.
And our company, and we're Helo Company Marines, and we just came out of like 35 days or 40 days of just all the way the fuck up, right? From day one till then, it was on. And then they were like, here, stay here. We're going to bring locals in, and we're going to sell them fertilizer. And our company's out doing helo raids still. And we're just sitting there like starting to go like itchy, Lord of the Flies. Like, we got to get the fuck out of here. Like, games started getting played by, the chain of commands. And, oh, man. Luckily, we got out of there pretty quick. But wild time. So what's next?
So after that deployment, came home, started doing another workup. They already told us, hey, you guys aren't, Afghanistan's closing down. So we did a weird workup, and we ended up going on a Black Sea rotation. I ended up in Romania. Got to go all over Europe. I mean, went to Bulgaria, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania.
Did you get to visit some of the stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you got to spend some time. Was it awesome?
It was. Yes, I mean, it was kind of like a vacation, which was weird to me because I didn't join the Marine Corps to go on vacation. I do that, take leave, do that on my own time. And at the time, I mean, it was all over the news. ISIS was running through Syria and Iraq, and, nobody was really doing anything about it. And we got told by our regimental commander, like, hey, you guys are not going. No matter what, you're not going. You're stuck here. You're here to deter Russia. Meanwhile, the Russians are in port in Constanta in Romania drinking with Marines at the bar. Like,
typical.
I had shore patrol one night, and I walk into a bar, and there's Marines, with a bunch of Russian sailors. One of the Marines had a Russian Navy hat on, and they're like doing shots together and high-fiving each other. I'm like, man, these guys don't want to kill us. Like,
this is all stupid.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah. So, wow. So that's fun. Yeah. So, anything notable?
No, I just remember, like I said, I remember sitting there watching the news in the chow hall, pissed off. Like, man, why are we here? Iraq's 1,000 miles that way. Like, we could literally be there, in hours.
Just wanting to get after it, and you're stuck on vacation.
Yep.
Motherfucker. Got it. Where do we go from there?
So from there, got home, got promoted to staff sergeant, and immediately got orders to 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines out in 29 Palms.
I bet you like that.
I did, man.
What did you like about that?
I mean, after 11 years at Lejeune, don't get me wrong, I know Verona Loop. I know Verona Loop like the back of my hand. I know all the ranges on Lejeune. Like, you could literally throw out a range, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, it's on this road. I know exactly where it's at. But just needed a, change of pace, just change of scenery, and, loaded up the wife and the kids and drove cross country and got out there, and there's nothing there, and it was just beautiful, just mountains, rocks, and
everything
sand,
you wanted it to be.
Yep.
No nonsense. Trained for war.
Oh, yeah.
They got a lot better training assets, in my opinion, out there, at least down to like the platoon and squad levels.
So I've had some really good Marines at Camp Lejeune, don't get me wrong. 3.6 and 2.8 had some great Marines, great leaders. But it wasn't until I got to 29 Palms and you realize those guys literally, you don't have La Mirage or Toby's or, anything. Driftwood. They don't have the purple church like the Pendleton Marines do. You got the ocean there. You got every restaurant and store and taqueria you could ever want. Mm-hmm. You got to 29 Palms, there's a couple of barber shops, like 3 tattoo parlors, a couple of Mexican restaurants, a Jack in the Box, and a Del Taco. That is it.
And a shitload of places to go train.
Oh, yeah. So those dudes, I mean, they literally just train, beat their dick, and get drunk. That is it. And work out.
Things to
and
do.
Work out. That is it.
That's right. I mean, hey, you make a lethal weapon with those 3 combinations, I reckon.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with some guidance. So you're out there, and what's your role out there?
So I got out there. They stuck me in cat platoon, which was awesome. Love being, around heavy guns and anti-tank missiles. Definitely in my element. Got out there, literally spent 4 months in the field. Then I got sent to infantry unit leader course out at Camp Pendleton for 3 months. Graduated that course. Went back to 29, checked in, immediately went on pre-deployment leave. Drove, at the time, I was going through a divorce, so drove my ex's stuff cross-country, dropped it off to her in Charlotte.
Sweet.
Got on a plane, flew back to 29 Palms, and the next day I was on a plane going to Iraq.
Get some.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. And you're going where this time?
So got there, started out in Al-Assad. I did a month in Al-Assad. Was literally running a 12 Marine security detail for Naval Special Warfare. So the NSW guys did a month there on their compound. It was awesome.
And what was their mission?
So
they
were going out and getting some.
Yeah.
Yep. And they were
trade packages,
training a lot of the host nations, so the Iraqis, a lot of the militias that were getting thrown together to go fight ISIS. They were in charge of training them. Mm-hmm. Spent a month doing that. Then I went to Kuwait for a few weeks, and then I got pulled. It was myself and 55 other guys. We went set up a little base in Mosul. I ended up growing my beard out, and I was doing some stuff I'm not really allowed to talk about.
Hell yeah! And how does that come about? Because you're in a regular infantry unit at the time, and then you just get snatched up.
So at the time, between the ODA, NSW, and Marine Raiders, they were all tapped out. And what was it? SOTF North, so Special Operations Task Force North for Northern Iraq. They needed help, and they're like, "Hey, we got some infantry guys that are really savvy. We'll pull them."
Fuck yeah! So you go up there and start banging with them.
Yep.
And how long does that last?
That was about 3.5 months, and then we went back to Kuwait. I was in Kuwait for a week and a half, and then I ended up going to Saudi Arabia for 2 weeks to train the Saudi Royal Marines, which was
sweet.
Crazy because at the time, Saudi Arabia, this was before women could drive, and everybody's like, man, the only Americans that can go into Saudi Arabia are Muslims on a pilgrimage to Mecca, or hey, you work for Saudi Aramco, the big oil company. That's it. Mm-hmm. So being a Westerner getting to go into Saudi Arabia was pretty neat.
Pretty wild. Wow. And so after Saudi Arabia, what's next after that?
So got back to Kuwait and spent another week and a half there, and then went to redeployed back to CONUS and started another workup. And
what unit again?
3-7.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd say I found out pretty early on that we were more than likely going to Syria for our next deployment. 2-7 was doing a workup, and we caught wind that they were trying to get their guys spun up on 120 millimeter mortars, which Marine Corps really doesn't have. We had rifled 120s, already did, but as far as the
Excalibur round?
Nope.
No. Just the big 120. Yeah.
So we have 60s and 81s. The Army has smoothbore 120s. Marine Corps doesn't, but they were trying to get their guys spun up because word on the street was they were going to Syria and they were going to be possibly operating 120s, which they were, but they weren't going out. They were doing it from static positions. Had a really good workup, and then early 2018 we deployed to Syria.
As a battalion?
So battalion, it was weird. The battalion was split up between Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Jordan, and Syria.
Yeah.
So we had Kilo Company, went to Afghanistan. India was in Kuwait. Pretty much every company put together guys to send to Jordan. Limo was in Iraq, and Just Weapons Company, my company, was in Syria.
What a shit show to track all of that as like a command staff, right? Like
that's split sections on a bigger scale.
On a large scale for a battalion to be so spread out. I mean, and if you're the battalion commander, you got guys in Afghanistan and Syria. Like, I'm not saying that the other places didn't have much going on, but out of the two, Afghanistan and Syria, and then where do you put yourself? So if you're a leader, you should be in a position of critical vulnerability of whatever element, the critical friction point. And then you got guys in multiple different areas.
Multiple theaters, yep.
What a shit show.
Well, it was strange, too. So it's a special purpose MAGTF CENTCOM, right? So that's all CENTCOM. However, we fell under different, in Syria, we fell under 5th Group Army Special Forces. They had operational control and tactical control over us.
So it's almost like you were just like attached to them, direct support, and then they're running the show from there.
Yep.
And when I read your warrant, that was written by their people too, right?
No, that was SP. Well, that was us, like Marines. My Marine Corps command wrote that.
Okay. Gotcha. I couldn't tell because of the unit designator that was at the top, and I wasn't sure if they wrote it, if you wrote it. Yeah. I mean, I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit lost. It's crazy. So, what's next?
Syria.
Get into it. How'd that go? Because that's kind of new. You're going to be definitely the first person to talk about Syria on here.
We got over there and
differences and similarities of the other campaigns.
This was definitely out of all my deployments. 6 deployments, 5 combat deployments. This was definitely my favorite, just because of the mission that we had, just because of who we were working with, the Marines I had, and what we were doing.
And so explain that to everybody that doesn't know.
The best way I can explain it would be, talk to a World War II vet, and they talk about fighting the Imperial Japanese or the Germans, how they were defeating evil in the world. That's the feeling that I got.
Because you're fighting ISIS now.
Yeah.
And ISIS is a brutal.
Way different than a bunch of guys in the mountains, way different than fighting, guys that came from different countries, just insurgents that just wanted to be somewhere fighting us. These guys had a no-shit army, no-shit using technology. Some of them wearing uniforms, some of them school-trained guys that banded together to try to overrun the world and use Islam as a, their call to prayer to get guys to come do their will.
As their fulcrum, yeah. Yeah, and so what's the mission set there? You get into Syria and you're working with...
So we were originally designated Sec 4, so we're just security forces for the ODA. Well, the ODA quickly found out that, hey, we're really good at mortars, we're really good at machine guns, we're really, really good at, shooting missiles and sniping. So
now, and how did you guys get selected for that? They just pulled, because in your write-up, they said they almost requested some senior level savvy guys on guns.
So they split everybody up. You had scout snipers, anti-tank missilemen, machine gunners, and mortarmen, along with a few, infantry officers and infantry unit leaders, which is what I was. They'd say, hey, these 14 or 15 guys, you go work with this ODA team. 20-some guys here, you go work with this ODA team here. Some of the locations were, 3 or 4 hours away from the Marine flagpole, which was pretty awesome. Some of the teams were better than others. I lucked out. I had 2 really great teams that all the guys knew their shit. All the guys were very passionate about what they were doing. And again, once they found out, we were as good as what we said we were on
They didn't want to
on our
roll without
weapons.
you.
They didn't want to go out without us, man.
Yeah, it sounds like from what we read in the beginning, it was probably a positive thing for them in the end. So
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the op tempo with them? I'm imagining high.
It started out, hey, we're just standing post and shooting mortars from a static position, and we'd go out to the flot, shoot some mortars, get some sympathetic dets off some IED belts, or hit a couple of known targets, and then eventually it was, hey, we're gonna knock down this berm that's been here for 3 years and take the fight to ISIS.
Mm-hmm.
And once that started, man, we started going out. We'd be out for 4 or 5 days and then come back for a day or two, refit, restock on ammo, and water, chow, fuel, and go right back out.
And it sounds like there was good continuity within the working relationships between you guys and the groups. But talk about that a little bit. Pretty easy to get along with, and seamless transition in. And
First name basis with all those guys. Again, I lucked out with guys that were really passionate about what they did. Very easy to get along with. It started out, hey, Marines, go prep 400 or 500 mortar rounds for this next mission, and it would just be the Marines out there doing it. Once we got into some shit with those guys, it was like every time we had to prep rounds, those guys are out there with us, the entire team.
Brought you full in. Yeah, that's awesome.
We did everything together, built places, tore down places, just fighting everything.
Well, let's work me up to the the day that the missile hits your truck. Like, work me up to that. Is there a work up to that, or is it just kind of like, boom, it happened?
That was when we first knocked down the berm. Like, hey, we're going to be one of the first teams to actually go across and see what's out there. We'd gone out a couple nights prior, and we knew they had IED belts out there in between, that berm and then the city of Dashisha. So we went out, shot mortars, got some sympathetic dets. Had
you just dropping mortars onto the berm to detonate
beyond the berm.
Okay.
Beyond the berm. In between that berm and the city of Dashisha, they had IED belts in place, so he couldn't just knock down the berm and drive across, right? Mm-hmm. So shooting mortars, getting some sympathetic dets, had Apaches fly over at night, pick up on the hot spots, did some gun runs on that, got some sympathetic dets, so we felt pretty confident that, what was out there was already handled. The couple days prior, we were briefed up on, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is what may or may not happen. This is what we think. Hey, this is why we're doing it. We're trying to map out their early warning network. We're trying to get intel and figure out who's there, how many guys are there, where they're at in the city, how long it takes them to respond. How are they going to respond to us being there,
What's their progression of force? And Yep.
So, didn't really do too many rehearsals. We did a few as far as who's going to be in what vehicle, who's going to be doing what, the loadout, the whole nine.
Which, and you're operating with these guys for how long at this point?
Almost 2 months, month and a half, 2 months.
So your op tempo's high, and it doesn't take very many missions to start molding and meshing in, knowing what you need, what you're going to pack out. Okay, so you're ready to roll, and the mission order's complete, and then it's time to execute. Walk us through that.
So we drove out to where we'd been firing mortars. We set up a 120 millimeter mortar along with another piece of gear that literally any indirect fire shot up at us, it would give us a 10-digit grid of where it came from.
A counter battery.
Yep. LCMR. Yep. What is it? Lightweight counter mortar radar. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. Set that up on our side of the flot. A bulldozer knocked a big hole in the berm, and we drove across. Set up. Drove about 2 clicks out. Set up a 81 millimeter mortar, and there were 2 trucks there. Most of my Marines were either there or on the 120, and then you had 2 MATVs with myself as a gunner on the 50, and then there was another MATV with a Marine gunning on the Mark 19 on the Crow. Mm-hmm. And we set up a position on the ridge line. They were about 50 meters away, and within minutes, we started taking more mortar fire. They knew we were there, and I could see guys
this
running
is
into buildings.
This is kind of the mission, is to go in there and probe just to see, like, stir up the nest and see what they send, who they have, what kind of technology.
How they react and how they're going to respond. Yep. So right away, again, we started taking mortar fire. I could see guys, literally flipping out and running into buildings, guys moving weapons and stuff, and we just started dialing in on that. I seen that, like, 7 guys run into a compound with weapons, called it out, lit that compound up so that we could mark it for mortars. Got mortars on it, destroyed that compound. Had spotters in a tree line, lit those guys up. They never heard from those guys again. We'd take mortar fire. My guys would either respond with the 120 or the 81. It would stop, and then we'd get mortar fire from somewhere else.
How many mortar teams do you think they had?
At least 5 or 6. I mean,
and spread out.
And spread
pretty
out.
good.
Yep. Depending on how far away they were, that would determine whether we were going to use the 120 or the 81 to hit it. And if we couldn't use one of those, I mean, we had air on station, so air was doing work the entire time as well.
What kind of air you have?
I know we had a C-130. I know we had Apaches, and I know we had, I think, F-18s.
So, the best air imaginable.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Throw an A-10 in there.
Yeah,
You're good to go.
Yeah, if you need it. No
I
shit.
love those things, man.
Yeah, man. We were talking about that with Finney last night, or last time we recorded, and talking to him. Like before I went to Margin, I'd been done multiple deployments. Never in my wildest dreams would I control A-10s. Never in my wildest dreams would I conduct an action front on 2 mutually fortified T-wall structured machine gun bunkers
with interlocking fields of fire.
It was, and then you go to these places, you do this stuff, and like I remember the first time I seen A-10 dive for us and just stitch the ground to pieces and then break out and have the countermeasures flying out. And I thought, and I'm thinking, this is fucking awesome. Like never did I think that I'd be there. So anyway, segue. But wild. So they had everything, and it sounds like their tactics are pretty good. They got spread out mortar teams. They got a complex ambush coming in, and it just keeps getting worse, right?
They sent guys in on mopeds, and I mean, I'm not going to tell you how we knew what they were going to send before they sent it. We knew everything that came at us except that missile, man.
Mm-hmm. Now you have interpreters and like ICOM interception marines, stuff like that. So that's what we had.
I won't get into it, but yeah,
secret squirrels.
We knew what was coming, with the exception of that missile. But yeah, they sent guys on mopeds with S-vests. There's a V-bid, so any vehicle that came within about 2 clicks of us, I lit it up. I mean, I could also see with that optic that was on that crow system, man. I mean, I could reach out and touch something. As far as you think 1830 for a 50 cal, no, you can push it out a lot further with that stabilizer and the ballistic computer. I could see, women and kids getting loaded up in bongo trucks along with livestock, and people were getting out. We got intel that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was actually in that town while we were doing that.
Makes sense why they would have hardened fighters there.
They were doing everything they could to get him out.
Mm-hmm. What's crazy is, we can talk about it later. Keep going.
But yeah, I mean, we were up there for about 3 hours, and I mean, I was just chipping away at different targets. My mortarmen were just going to town on different targets, and for about 3 hours, and then that missile hit. And when that missile hit, holy shit, man! Like everything just kind of stopped.
And you don't hear an outgoing or anything because it's fired from a couple clicks away.
It was at least 2 kilometers away, and luckily, myself and the driver were in the vehicle, like no shit, in the vehicle. My vehicle commander was an ODA guy. I won't say his name, but he saw it coming and yelled incoming and literally opened his door and jumped off the side of the vehicle at the last second. The other Green Beret was on a Barrett in the box part of the MAT-V, like pretty much, he'd be sitting, if it was a pickup truck, he'd be sitting in the bed, and he saw it coming and got down in the last second. Me and the driver were just kind of like incoming, and it hit.
And I don't talk about the weapon that hit you a little bit because it's not something that everybody's heard of. So
it's a Concourse Missile. It's a wire-guided missile, much like our tow missile. It's wire guided, so once you fire it, pretty much whoever fires it has to control it on it and keep it locked onto the target. So this guy, pretty sure he popped up out of a tunnel and fired this thing, and it's an anti-tank guided missile. So it's designed to hit a tank and literally kill everybody inside and destroy it. And somehow it hit my vehicle and didn't kill any of us, messed us up pretty good, and it's a miracle that we made it out.
Do you remember much of the flow?
I remember everything.
So walk me through it.
Best way I could describe one, it's the hardest hit I've ever taken in my life. I've been in a lot of fights. I've been hit in the face and damn near knocked out. I've never felt like I was ever going to get knocked out until this. Like I was seeing stars, just wanted to close my eyes and just go to sleep. But I had to watching, seeing all the sparks and shit fly everywhere, seeing my driver eat all that shrapnel, and just.
Did it hit the driver's side? Is that where it hit?
It hit the front passenger side. So I was sitting in the middle in the back. He was sitting in the driver's seat. He caught all the shrapnel. Luckily, the computer screen for that Crow, it's kind of like you're playing Xbox. There's an Xbox controller, and you got a big computer screen in front of you. That caught most of it. The entire cab filled up with flames. All the hair that was on my arms and hands and my eyebrows and shit was just singed off. And, I knew he caught it a lot worse, so I just fought it. And as soon as I realized what happened, I opened the door and fucking jumped out. Made sure the ODA dude on the ground was okay. He had some burns on his hand. He was right there, where it hit pretty much, but ground level. Mm-hmm. I was like, hey, our driver's hit. Again, I'm not going to give up names, but we ran around the back of the vehicle, and before we could even make it to the back of the vehicle, a mortar round landed like 25, 30 meters away. And we're like, oh shit, they're right on top of us. Made it around the vehicle, opened the door, pulled him out, drug him behind the vehicle. He's a big 6'4", 280-pound Army EOD guy, and knew he had arterial bleeding on both his legs. So I pulled out a tourniquet. ODA guy pulled out a tourniquet, and I was like, hey man, I got it. Like, do what you got to do. Took his tourniquet, put both of them on his legs, and he went to go find a stretcher. And he's already talking on the radio, coordinating stuff. We ended up finding a stretcher, loading him on the stretcher, gave him a ketamine lollipop, threw him in the back of a partner force vehicle. The SDF had like a Bearcat, almost like something between an MRAP and a JLTV that we got now. That's replacing all the Humvees with. Loaded him up in that. We're still getting mortar fire. We're still getting machine gun fire.
And are there machine gun fires on you, accurate on you?
Not accurate, but I mean, you could hear disc rounds just, zipping by and hitting the dirt. What's that?
They had technicals with Dishkas, I'm assuming?
Yep.
Okay.
So when I got hit, there was a almost like a Hilux with a Dishka on the back, pintle mount, that literally was shooting at us. I zoomed out on the Crow, saw it, and was like, holy shit. Zoomed in on it, hit it a couple of times with a couple of bursts, and that thing drove right behind the building and would not move.
He didn't want it after that. I
was holding on that while the ODA guy was, trying to talk him on to where it was at. He's trying to pull up a grid on his tablet to hit it and get air on it, and that's when we got hit.
And, okay. And so a second missile comes in at some point, right? Am I remembering that right?
Yep. So after we got our driver out of there, already knew that he was, on his way back to our side of the friendly lines, on our side of the flot. We had to go back in the vehicle and pull out his weapon, his helmet with nods in it. We had a bunch of other sensitive items in there. We had Mipliks in the back, the case that the Barrett came in. There's all kind of stuff. And the vehicle was already completely on fire. And I had to go in the back, and the VC seat was on fire, and I had my gunfighter belt, my IFAK, and some extra mags clipped to the back of that, and I had to unclip it while that seat was on fire. It was a pain in the ass.
I imagine. And the arms probably, too.
The whole time, my head's just throbbing, and I'm throwing up everywhere, threw up all over myself. It was like, just felt like shit, man. But I'm pulling all this stuff out. They're pulling stuff out, and I don't even remember that other missile, hitting or not hitting or wherever it impacted, but the other MAT-V had backed up and, came by our vehicle. I thought they were going to rig us for tow, but there was no, you're not going to tow a burning, 8,000-pound vehicle. It's not possible. They're like, hey, we need to get out of here. So the Syrian Democratic Force guys that we kicked out of the back of their vehicle to make room for our wounded driver, we literally threw them in the back of this vehicle along with all the Mipliks and other sensitive items that we did grab. There was no room for us. 5 seats inside that MAT-V. They're all have asses in them. So we literally hung to the outside of the other MAT-V as it's driving away. Mortar rounds are still impacting around us. And one of those F-18s did a flyby, super low. And, I mean, it just sounded like sheets getting ripped apart, really loud. And I didn't know what it was, still kind of shell-shocked. And I was just like, oh, fuck, here it is. We're dead. But it did its flyby, and I'm like, oh, my God, that was amazing. And we're just hanging on the side of this MATV as mortar rounds are impacting behind us and all around us. Like, whatever. Went back to the 81 position. They went Winchester on rounds, loaded up those guys. Everybody got cross-loaded in between the two vehicles that were there, and then we drove back to our side. And that was it, man.
No, that's it.
I mean, we learned a lot.
That's a lot.
We gained a lot of intel. We killed a lot of bad guys that day, man. We made it, brought everybody back. I'll bite, some wounds, but.
And the whole time this is going on, I'm imagining that your air's doing work too, right?
Oh,
like your Apaches are finding them. And
they were going ape shit, man.
it's like a wet dream for an Apache because those Apaches are insane.
They'll just come in and just destroy shit.
Well, their weapon systems and the technology on their pods and stuff is absolutely insane what they're able to do, where they're able to fire from. It's like essentially, I was talking to a pilot and he said over the mountains, he liked the mountains fighting because they could come up to a point where their pod could see over the mountain as long as they have the standoff, and they can engage from there. So literally this thing can engage you without the pilot even seeing through the structure in front of him. It's insane, man. I'm sure they got after it pretty good and had a pretty solid day that day.
Oh yeah,
intense, man. Well, I'm glad to hear about the missile because never heard of it before. Like it's not something I ever fought, not something I ever went against on the battlefield myself. I know you were with me that like most of the time. That's insane. And so, you haven't experienced any kind of head trauma? I mean, because that's some serious head trauma. But you have some serious issues from that.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. You have permanent lesion. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, my driver ended up getting medevac that day. I didn't leave until the next day. The two other ODA guys, they kind of just were like, hey, we're good. Right? I got medevac to Baghdad. I spent 5 days there and then went back to Syria to spend another 5.5 months there fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I knew, the headaches, I never had those before, but those still haven't really gone away.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until I got back that I started, hey, I'm forgetting shit, memory loss, drive home from work every day, same way, and then I forget to stop at a stop sign, doing 55, blew right across. Thank God it was open desert. I was still out 29 Palms,
mm-hmm.
but blew right through it, man. And it was just like, what the hell? And it was little things. And then eventually I wasn't sleeping. I'd be awake for 2 or 3 days, and then eventually I'd fall asleep, and I'd sleep for 12 to 15 hours and wouldn't wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Was late for work. That was causing issues. A lot of things, man.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not saying I'm in the same ballpark. I do have some permanent issues that they found at the Intrepid Spirits Clinic when I went through that. Well, we were out there, talk about it a little bit in the book, but we got into a pretty good scuffle with these guys, with the Taliban one day, and so we were like traveling over watching away from the fight. We went up there, fucked them up all day, and then they would wait. Like when they were done, they would wait till we RTB'd, and as soon as we turned our back, they want to play, cat and mouse games with us on the way out, try to get a cheap kill or something. It was just their tactic. And so this day we're traveling Overwatch. We had 3 elements out. I had my element, a weapons element that my platoon sergeant was running, and then a partner squad leader had his element. And so he's out kind of in an open step, and we're just bounding back. Boom, we'd take a building, he'd hold. You know how it is. He's going to bound back now. Our other element was already to the south of us, and so us two were bounding back past them, or trying to get back past them. So my squad takes it, building over a very large compound, probably like, 100 meters by 100 meters, maybe 75 meters by 75 meters for the square, for the outer walls. And then all the way on the, on the away from the enemy side, or away from our squad that's moving side, I had 3 saws on the roof. I had him. Were you on the roof?
I was on the ground.
He's on the ground. I think he was covering door. Were you?
No, I was moving to a wall.
Moving to the wall. Well, I had went to the opposite side courtyard wall, and it was just big enough to provide good cover, but I could get up on it and engage if I needed to.
But it was a shorter wall than normal. That was the weird thing.
Yeah, because usually the walls were 6, 8, 10 feet up and
it
thick.
only faced north and east, and then the compound was to the west, and then all to the south it was all open.
Right. And so I'm trying to glass. My squad's set, my guys watching doors, all my machine guns are on the roof. I'm good. I go out to glass, and I'm glassing because we've been hitting these guys, and they're like playing screening games with us. So I'm glassing my Marines, looking through the partnered squad and the ANA that are coming in. And I probably couldn't tell you it at the time, but I knew that there was an outgoing round fired. I don't know if I felt it, sensed it, heard it. You guys might have heard it too, but it was something. Boom. And it was like complex ambush opening up. That went off, and then boom, machine guns hit the squad moving. Instantly achieve a hit. They hit one of the partner DNA guys. He goes down with a femoral and an armpit, which is horrible, right? So that happens. Well, then the incoming hits, and it hits like what?
Like 20 meters out of that fucking wall. Because
So
I was like
I'm in the
halfway
glass
across
trying
the
to-
compound facing north.
I'm in the glass trying to see it, and then it was like just boom, boom. And like what you said, I've been knocked out. I was on all Marine boxing team before that unit and got concussed pretty good. But when it hit, it was just like boom, boom, and like took the breath out of me. And you figure for an 82 millimeter mortar, that's in the kill range if you don't have that wall there. And just like boom. And I remember went down and I looked up at the squad from laying down because I knew I was rocked, and I was like, shoot them all like that way. And all the saws opened up. And climbed back up, and just like as soon as I could get back up to get into it, because there was a guy with an 82 millimeter mortar that we were tracking on a moped. And I'm like, it has to be him, right? So we're looking for him. So by the time I get up, I wipe my face, and I got blood coming out of like I want to say it was my right ear. Might have been both of them. I'm like, fuck. And as soon as I get up, whoa, boom, the second one. Didn't hear the outgoing. Didn't know they shot again. And I go down again, and I'm like, all of them just fucking, it's that way, And so they're getting after it, and then in the same kind of thing. In the time, not thinking about it, I was nauseous. I took a concussion on the boxing team where it was like what you were saying, where you're sitting there, you just like can't get with it, and you're puking, and like the floor would start doing, canvas dance kind of thing. And dealt with that a little bit, but like you said, it wasn't until I got home till I realized the memory lapsing, and I realized the migraines and just different things. And then now I get out and I have grand mal seizures, and they say, well, it's probably the brain damage. We've done every epileptic test that we can do on you to induce a seizure. Can't do it, but they're definitely 3 grand mal, 7-minute, 6-minute long, bite through my tongue, piss myself seizures that they can't identify. So you got to think that's probably linked to the damage. So not cool. I think there's a lot to be said about brain damage, and a lot more studying that we need to do. I recently turned on to a new treatment, and it's SF Army guy, 22 years in the teams kind of guy, and he got blown up on the last one, wanted to put a team together because he never had PTSD symptoms or anything. And they made a documentary called Quiet Explosions about it, and it's like a couple of dollars, but it's definitely worth a look, worth a watch, because I want to say they're offering it at Duke and in Charlotte and Raleigh, and they're injecting, the way I understand it, injecting anti-inflammatory proteins into the damaged area of the brain. And it's not only did his migraines and like his post-concussive blast syndrome symptoms go away, his PTS symptoms went away, his anxiety went away, and his doctors are like, a lot of this is not PTS, a lot of this is post-blast, and it's the swelling from the brain where it's damaged is affecting anxiety and memory, short-term and long-term. So it's different strokes for different folks depending on the severity. But I think the more that we learn about that, hopefully, the more that we learn about it, the more we can combat it, because it's a big issue. And God forbid if it, we have CTE coming up into the limelight now. People are realizing that this is a problem within the ranks as well, not just on football teams. So our hope is that we can bring more awareness to it, more exposure to it, so we can drive people to say, hey, this needs attention. We shouldn't be sending the best of our people to other countries to get treatments. We should be able to do that here.
Oh, yeah.
And the funding needs to come from somebody at the top that says that's worth it. That Dakota Meyer doesn't have to go to Mexico to get treatment for his anxiety anymore. That guys like us can have something, like you can have something here safe at home that really is trying to fix them, versus what it seems like is going on now with different regulations and different administrations coming in, making things okay, not okay. And it's like, can we just help these people? Like, they've done all of this. Can we focus on it? So that's the way I feel about that. But John, I think we've done this for a couple hours now, and we've talked about some good stuff. I greatly appreciate you coming. On behalf of me, Choice Not Chances, Matt, of everybody, and all the war fighters that are getting to kind of hear this good gouge. I mean, this could be something that they're facing in not so near future. I mean, we never know with the way the world's going. So I'll give you one last word, man. Anything you want to put out there? Anybody, any kind of message, any kind of thing that you want to put out there?
Well, first off, I just want to say, Ryan, Matt, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, the opportunity to do this. I mean, there's a lot of crazy shit going on in the world right now. I mean, I look at it from my point of view, man. I mean, I never wanted to do anything but fight, and I got to do plenty of that, and I'm glad, I was put in the spots that I was put in and got to do what I did, and it's kind of coming to an end now. I mean, I'm at Wounded Warrior and on a med board, looking to probably going to get retired, but still, I mean, I'm constantly, still doing stuff for the military. Kind of got a job lined up that's going to keep me really tied to the Marine Corps, and
absolutely
still making an impact. I'm not going to lose that sense of purpose, and I think that a lot of vets get out, especially guys like us that been through the things that we've been through and did some of the things that we did. That's one of the things that happens when they get out and they go to transition out, is they lose that sense of purpose, and then shit starts to fall apart and they just kind of lose themselves. And I mean, I've lost a lot of good friends to suicide and drugs and some other things, and it's just I think the best thing that I know that helps me is just one, staying close to the military, but two, just staying around, being around guys like us,
like-minded individuals that have been in the ringer, and that is the key demographic of people that I'm going to have on this show, because the more people we can show like you that have been hit hard, hitters, but you got hit hard, but you didn't let that hard hit define your life. Then it breathes hope into everybody else that's struggling to say, you know what, like personal example, Marcus Luttrell did that for me. Unknowingly, he released a book that helped me, and I read it in Afghanistan.
Yep.
And I started taking notes, and I started writing because of it. And that one thing changed so many people that he didn't even mean to do. Like, he wanted to tell a story, but he changed lives with it. And if we can use this as a conduit for information passing to change one person, maybe one guy goes downrange and heard something from your podcast that maybe tips him off, to give him something, a learned experience that now that he's going through, he can be infinitely better at that experience because of what he learned here or in a book or whatever. That's the whole purpose. So help the future war fighters with what they got going on, and to help guys that have already been through the ringer with whatever resources and whatever information we could pass out to them. So great content. Again, thank you so much. And everybody out there, hope you guys enjoyed the episode with John Wayne, and we'll see you next time on Choices Not Chances.
Thank you.
How we doing, everybody? This is the co-host of Choices Not Chances podcast, Matthew Charette. As mentioned in the beginning of the show, this episode of the podcast is sponsored by Louisiana Gun Shop. The folks at Louisiana Gun Shop have been a longtime supplier of firearms and shooting supplies and services, as well as very good friends of mine. One day, we will get the owner and founder, Harlan Boblet, on the show. At Louisiana Gun Shop, the sky is the limit when it comes to getting the firearms and accessories you want for your current or future firearms. They have a nice selection of handguns, rifles, and shotguns in stock, or can order just about any firearm you could want or need. They specialize in concealed carry handguns and custom AR-15 builds. In addition to firearms, they also carry ammo, suppressors, optics, and a wide variety of gun parts for the upgrade and maintenance of your firearms. If you want to get further into the upgrade side of things, they provide customization services such as Cerakote, laser engraving, and Kydex holsters. So like I stated before, Louisiana Gun Shop is located on Highway 90 West in Broussard, Louisiana, just south of Lafayette. It used to be Louisiana Gun Shop did not have an online presence, but now I am happy to announce that their website is up and ready for business for online sales to all 50 states at louisianagunshop.com. Louisiana Gun Shop also offers Louisiana residents concealed carry classes for a very reasonable price. Harlan's experience in the concealed carry space when it comes to the laws and the do's and the don'ts is pivotal in attaining your Louisiana concealed carry license. As well as the firearm market, Harlan also conducts explosives training for Louisiana blasters licenses for oil field and special effects workers in Louisiana. Workers in these fields from out of state will also need to have their training in this field to complete their work in Louisiana. So whether you need a firearm, upgrade your old firearm, targets and ammo for a range day, or you just like to talk to people who support the Second Amendment, Louisiana Gun Shop is your place, either in person or online. Remember, they are located on Highway 90 West in Broussard, Louisiana, just south of Lafayette, or online at louisianagunshop.com. You can also follow them on Instagram and Facebook at Louisiana Gun Shop. A special thanks to Harlan and Jenny at Louisiana Gun Shop for sponsoring the show. Please support them so they can support us and keep the podcast free for all. Thanks, have a great day, Semper Fi, and God bless America.
Not too far. You're marking a building. Hit him. Yeah, that's good.
That's a good shot. That's money.
Yeah.